There you are. Hello, guys. If you're watching this right now, it's probably because you're on the replay. Put hashtag replay in there so I know that you've been with us. I am excited about this topic. It's an interesting topic. Do you know why I'm excited about it? Not because I'm excited to go through it, but because it's a topic we all deal with. So I'm going to roll up my sleeves. I'm going to wait for you to get on. And then we're going to get started and talk about this. My home office has been going through a redesign. This is not the final version. This is just the current version that I'm in. But I've come back downstairs today. All right. When you're here, say hello. Say, I am excited to talk about, you're not actually excited to talk about what to do when you fail, but that's what we're going to talk about today is what to do when you fail, because sometimes that happens to us. Sometimes we fail, and that's not fun, but it's just one of those things that we go through. So we will get started here in just a second. I'm going to take a drink of water while you join us. All right. So here's the deal. I get notes. These are my notes. I fail pretty consistently. Sometimes on a daily basis, I fail. But here's what I want to tell you about that. The only way to have a good idea, and I think that a lot of you guys value my opinion on that, and you see that I'm doing a lot of things, and you're like, Tiffany's doing all these things. My buddy's calling me. I failed at that, not turning down my phone. But the only way to have a good idea is to have a whole lot of ideas and to implement them, measure what happens, and then decide if you've succeeded or not. But what we're going to talk about today is what to do when you fail. I'm turning my phone ringer down right now. So if you have questions as we're going through this, please feel free to stop me. But what I want you to think about is, did you set yourself up for failure in the process? So imagine right now, hi Holly, imagine right now that you're going through or have gone through a failure, or you can use this when you're going through a failure later. But the first thing to evaluate is, did you believe that you could do it? Like really and truly, did you believe whatever you failed at that you could do? Did you set yourself up for success with this activity? I think one of the things that I did very much through my 20s is I, number one, didn't believe in myself to accomplish my goals, but also I didn't tell people about it, because if I didn't tell people about my goals, then hey Joe, if I didn't tell people about my goals, then there was nobody that I had to admit I failed to. And so I kept my goals to myself, I kept my plans to myself, I kept my ideas to myself, and then also I didn't necessarily implement them. But because I had never told anybody my goals, I didn't really fail anyone but myself. And so then I would continually fail to myself without any sort of accountability, support, planning, action items, anything. I just allowed myself to fail because it goes back to I didn't really believe that I could achieve them. And also I put too much emphasis on what I was doing, and then it fell flat. It failed, right? So I think that's important. Did you share your goal with someone else? Whatever it was. Did you share it with someone else? Did you make a plan for success? Did you research your market? Did you pay attention to the dollars that it was going to cost you to implement this idea? Did you make an action plan, and then did you actually implement it? Those are some of the questions to think about in this process. And then the last thing that I'll say about this, and then we're going to move on to a different section of this topic, is, did you gamble with more than you were actually able to spend? So you can think of like going to the casino, right? Some people spend way too much, and then it affects their other bills, where other people go in with a very specific set of money that they are prepared to lose. And so there's this aspect of when somebody does something so very huge and it fails, it's devastating to them because they gambled with more than they were actually able to lose. And I would encourage you, and again, we're going to jump into this conversation a little bit deeper. I would encourage you to think about whatever you're doing or whatever you're getting ready to go into or whatever you're planning for, because the spring market is coming. We're coming into a time of bigger, more marketing, more sales, more time for you. There's going to be a lot more going on. And so when you're thinking about all of these things, do it against the threshold of, did you seek a lot of advisors? Did you make your plans? Did you have an accountability partner? Did you have a plan for success? Because a lot of times we don't. And then we're devastated when we fail. So that's my initial thoughts on failure. Now we're going to go a little bit into it. So I I've shared my postcard story quite a bit with you guys, but there are other stories of failure. But really and truly, like every single day I try something, and sometimes it falls flat, and that's okay. But there are bigger failures and there are smaller failures. There are different levels of failure. But the bottom line is it's going to happen because you have a lot going on, because we're humans, because we rely on other people for these things, because we ourselves invest so much into the anticipation of doing something, and then sometimes it falls flat. So what we're going to talk about are some tactics for dealing with failure and how to move forward in your life, whether it's a big failure, whether it's a little failure. Like I said, I've experienced all levels of failure, cataclysmic, life-changing failures, to a marketing effort falling flat. So there's a spectrum of them, but I think that these principles can be applied no matter where you're at. The first one I would encourage you to do is avoid blame shifting and allowing yourself to get stuck in a victim mentality. And I am not saying that there is not somebody to blame, and I am not saying that you are not the victim. It could very much be that you are the victim in that situation, and or you can shift the blame to somebody else and point to where that issue is based on the fact that they failed you in their expectations. But unless you learn to move on, and it's okay to do this for a day, but unless you move on from that, you will be stuck there. And to the degree that you failed, if it was a big giant failure, you will be stuck there for an extended period of time. I had just to be slightly vulnerable with you guys, I had a very overwhelming failure in society's mind, and also mine for many, many, many years. In my teenage years, I am a teen mom. I was a teen mom, and I could have allowed that to dictate the path for the rest of my life. And I would have been entitled to do so, and allow that to be the narrative and to direct how I move forward. But instead, I had to make a decision for the benefit of myself, for the benefit of my goals, for the benefit of my now family, that I had to move on from that. And unless I instinctively and intentionally and specifically moved on from that decision, obviously I still have my child with me, but I guess that's not obvious. But what I'm saying is I still had the consequences of that decision and that failure in society's mind, but I can move on and shift and put some of these other actions into place. And so what I'm saying is avoid the blame shifting, because you will be stuck there and it will be devastating, and you will be on the couch if you continue to allow this to be your narrative. You need to move on, and you need to move on quickly. And we're going to talk about other ways to do that. But the first thing is you have to avoid blame shifting. You may really and truly have legitimately been burned by somebody else, but you cannot let that keep you from moving forward. Oh, I'm moving my table. I'm not going to do that to you anymore. Okay. And then the other thing that you need to do in this section is evaluate what your expectations of the situation was. So if you had expectations that somebody else was going to be putting in and they didn't, or you had expectations that you were going to hit a certain milestone and you didn't, or if you were burned by somebody else by what they promised you or what your expectations are, whatever it is, you need to evaluate what your expectations were, so that you can see where the failure came in, but you're not going to hang out there. You're just going to acknowledge that it was a failure and that you can move on. The second thing that I encourage you to do, the first one, avoid the blame shifting, avoid the victim mentality pitfall as much as you can. You can hang out there for a day, but then move on. Secondly, be curious. I think it's very important for you to learn from failures. I think that failures are something that can teach us greater things about ourselves. I personally feel like I learn more about myself in a failure than I do in a success, but it's because I come at it with a curious mindset. I have to figure out why. I'm really driven by this idea of why did something occur? Why does it work? Why is it a success? Why does this make sense? Or why doesn't it make sense? And so I measure it through the lens of curiosity. rather than demonizing someone, or rather than being devastated myself. So one of the things that I've said a lot, I'm just looking at my notes. That's why I keep, oh, what's going on with my hair there? I just keep looking down at my notes. One of the things that I say a lot is a repeat actually of what our founder, Dennis Degnan, says a lot is either you have a plan or you don't. You work your plan or you don't, or your plan works or it doesn't. And so the first level of curiosity is finding out where that disconnect is. Was it that I legitimately did not have a plan for what I was implementing, or that I didn't work my plan, which is almost always the case, is that I am the disconnect in the failure, because I'm a human and I do human things and I self-sabotage myself when I'm trying to do things and it's not good for anybody. But typically I'm the disconnect there, or the plan worked or it didn't. So I had expectations in my mind based on what the plan was going to do. I measured my successes against my daily actions. Every single day I'm doing the daily actions, but then it just didn't work out, which I'm going through right now, and it kind of sucks. So in that case, I've identified the issue, the disconnect, as my plan. My plan did not execute. And so then I need to figure out, all right, if my plan didn't work, what is that exact thing within the plan that's failing? And I'm looking at the mechanism, not the person. So if it's a person that's not living up to the expectations, well, I need to not have that person. If I replace that person in the plan, does that then change? So that's something. The other thing, and this is from a broker's perspective, so that I hope that you understand why I'm saying this. I work with a lot of salespeople. You guys are salespeople. I work with a lot of salespeople. And I think one of the things that salespeople are very, very, very good at are the human relationship based conversations, for building up rapport, for developing know, like, and trust, for doing the sales related conversations. One of the things that I have not seen the same level of skill set at is organization follow up. So organization and follow up and reaching out for support. They just continue to push ahead, but they don't plug back in for support or to be replenished or to be organized in what they're doing with their paperwork or whatever the case is. But they're charging so far ahead in the human element of it that they forget the paperwork aspect or neglect the paperwork aspect of that. And so if the failure in this situation is one of those things that you're not spending time on, then do you need to hire that out? Do you need to eliminate it? Can it be somebody in your brokerage that can fill that gap? But if you identify where that weak link is, if you're curious enough about it to identify where that weak link is, then you can find somebody to fill it, or you can move on. And then that's the last thing. The third thing is start fresh or shift. Do you need to start fresh? And that's why I posted on my timeline today that it's the new year. It's the Aztec New Year, which you guys are probably like, Tiffany, you acknowledge the Chinese New Year, the Jewish New Year, the Aztec New Year. I'm telling you guys, more often than not, we really just need resets. Like, it is okay to give ourselves the grace to start again and or decide to shift. It is totally fine to do that for yourself, because if you don't, you're going to be stuck back on number one, which was blame shifting or being a victim and staying in that victim mentality. And then you won't ever reach out again because you feel so burned by this one failure. I'm telling you guys, it is okay to start again. It is always okay to start again. But what you need to do is learn from what you've done before to move forward with something better and greater and bigger and higher calling for your life. It is okay to start again. In fact, it's necessary to start again, because otherwise you're going to be stuck in the rut for forever. So what you do when you start again, make another plan, put it on paper, get a support partner, plug into your brokerage wherever you're at, and then implement the plan, actually do the plan consistently as you have written it, measure what your results are, and then adjust accordingly. If you need to adjust a little here or there, totally fine, adjust a little here or there. But that's how we learn, and that's how we grow, and that's how we have progress, is when we're moving through these processes, but we don't give up. We are constantly moving through them and gaining and growing. But I'm telling you guys, my first point, it circles all the way back around. You can have a really, really great idea, but the way to have great ideas and great success is in the everyday little ideas that you have a lot of. And some of them work and some of them don't. But the fact that you're curious about why they work or why they don't is why you move forward. And I have one more note here. And then if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. If not, we can wrap this up quickly, and that's fine too. Failing does not mean you're a failure. And I think a lot of the times we get stuck there. We get stuck in this, well, I failed, and so then therefore I am a failure, and I feel so burned that I'm not going to reach out again. That's not necessarily the case. Okay, you are not a failure. You just failed, and you're going to learn from it and you're going to grow from it. And it's part of the human experience to go through these failures so that we learn and we grow and we move forward. It is when gold or gems or whatever come up out of the ground, they are not in their perfect state. They have to go through this process of testing and fire and refining and cutting and pressure and all of the things to become the beautiful things that we know them to be. It is the same for your human experience. It is the same for your sales experience. It is the same for testing out any new idea or new business or whatever. You need to give yourself the grace of going through the learning and failing and refining process to become what you have been called to be. And I really and truly believe that if you can embrace some of these points and move forward without being stuck in that pit just because you failed once or twice or 365 times this year, then you are going to make a bigger impact and you're going to have a really, really good quality of life. But you have to decide that for yourself. And it has to be sometimes a daily decision to move forward. And that's what I have to say about that. If you guys have any questions or comments, or just you want to encourage each other, which is a great thing to do, post them in the comments. Otherwise, you guys enjoy the rest of your day. That's all I had to say today. Bye.